we all carry within us. Thanks for joining us today, and see you next time.
Gyeongju, a city that holds 1,000 years of history. The cherished values, preserved over time, have shaped who we are today. Now, through new encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Gyeongju come together. APEC meets Gyeongju.
In our headlines on this Wednesday, October 1st, here in South Korea. The country commemorates the 77th anniversary of the founding of its armed forces today with a pledge to bolster its self-defense capabilities in light of shifting geopolitics. Meanwhile, on the trade front, South Korea's exports expand at a faster than expected pace in September in spite of U.S. tariffs, bolstered by chips, cars, and more working days. And officials from Seoul and Washington have launched a joint working group to pave visa tracks for the entry of highly skilled South Korean workers into the U.S. following last month's ICE detention and subsequent departure of such workers from Georgia. We start with President Lee Jae-myung's address in commemoration of the country's Armed Forces Day on this Wednesday, October 1st. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
In his first Armed Forces Day address, President Lee Jae-myung began by calling on South Korea's military to swiftly restore public trust.
국민을 지켜야 할 군대가 국민을 향해 총을 겨누는 일은 앞으로 어떤 경우에도 결단코 있어서는 안 됩니다.
He was referring to the mobilization of troops during last December's martial law declaration under his predecessor. Speaking at a ceremony marking the 77th anniversary of the founding of the country's armed forces, South Korea's commander-in-chief stressed that the military must safeguard peace and prosperity for the people. And in a rapidly changing security environment, Lee says maintaining peace or a secure state free from the fear of war requires robust self-defense capabilities.
북한 GDP의 1.4배에 달하는 국방비를 지출하는 세계 5위 군사력을 갖춘 우리 국방력에 대한 높은 자부심과 굳건한 믿음의 기초에 강력한 자주 국방의 길로 나아가야 합니다.
To that end, the president pledged to restructure the armed forces with cutting-edge technologies. Citing forecasts that future battlefields will be unmanned, Lee highlighted South Korea's increased defense budget for next year, saying it will focus on investing in artificial intelligence, drones, and robots. At the same time, South Korea will take back wartime operational control from the United States, which President Lee aims to accomplish within his 5-year term.
굳건한 한미 동맹 기반 위에 전시 작전 통제권을 회복하여 대한민국이 한미 연합 방위 태세를 주도해 나가도록 하겠습니다.
While peacetime operational control was transitioned to Seoul in 1994, wartime control remains with Washington. The president also promised to improve the service conditions and compensation for military personnel, the backbone of the military, to boost morale. Following the ceremony, the president hosted a luncheon honoring service members, veterans, and the families of those in uniform. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And in related news, this year's Armed Forces Day event was noticeably scaled down. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung explains.
The first Armed Forces Day celebrated under the Lee Jae-myung administration was quite scaled down compared to the previous celebratory events under Yoon Suk-yeol administration. Marking its 77th anniversary of the founding of South Korea's armed forces, this year's event took place at the military headquarters at Gyeryong in Chungcheong-namdo province. For the 1.5-hour event, fewer than 1,000 personnel took part, just 1/5 the size of last year's that involved around 5,000. Around 100 pieces of equipment, including K2 tanks, Cheonmu multiple rocket system, were on display. This again was significantly downscaled from last year's over 300, and even the budget for this year's event was just about 1/3 of last year's 7.2 billion Korean won, according to the Armed Forces Day planning team. The most noticeable difference was the absence of a city parade. Under the Yoon administration, a parade was held in central Seoul for 2 consecutive years in 2023 and 2024, and the day was even designated as a temporary public holiday last year. Considering the fact that the parade is usually held once every 5 years and none took place under the Moon Jae-in administration, the Yoon government's decision was quite rare. This year's event rather focused on the military being integrated with the people, with a joint civilian-military taekwondo demonstration taking place after President Lee's military review.
It was an honor to be able to perform in front of the soldiers who protect our country, and it allowed me to feel an even deeper sense of patriotism.
It is an honor to take part in the 77th Armed Forces Day. As a future combat capabilities unit, we will serve with dedication to ensure our people's safety.
Rotary and fixed-wing aircraft formations, along with the Air Force's Black Eagles aerobatic team carrying out an advanced flight show, brought the ceremony to a splendid finale. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
On the trade front, exports soared in September, beating expectations on the back of cars and chips despite U.S. tariffs. In fact, with regard to semiconductor shipments, they posted an all-time high. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon has details.
South Korea's exports set a new record in September, reaching $65.95 billion, a 12.7% increase year-on-year. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Wednesday, this all-time high surpasses the previous record from March 2022 and marks the 4th consecutive month of export growth. Third quarter exports also set a new record at $185.03 billion.
Among the 15 major export items, 10 saw increases, including semiconductors, automobiles, and biohealth. Industries with strong technological foundations, particularly within the country's key export sectors, are successfully capitalizing on current market conditions. Specifically, in the semiconductor industry, high value-added memory chips for AI servers are recording significant growth, driven by robust demand.
Semiconductor exports reached a new all-time high of $16.61 billion, a 22% increase on year, driven by demand for high-value memory products for AI. Automobile exports recorded their best September ever at $6.4 billion, up 16.8% on year, with growth in all vehicle types. Biohealth, chips, and general machinery also saw significant growth. On the other hand, petrochemical and steel exports declined by 2.8% and 4.2% respectively due to lower global unit prices. As for regions, all but U.S. exports saw increases. While exports to the U.S. decreased by 1.4% due to the imposed tariffs, shipments to China increased by 0.5%, returning to growth for the first time in 4 months. Exports to the EU reached an all-time high of $7.16 billion, a 19.3% increase, and exports to ASEAN hit a September record of $11.06 billion, up 17.8%. The government says this is a trend that is likely to continue and it won't miss the opportunity.
While the favorable export performance in September was partly due to an increase of 4 working days, we believe it is crucial not to overlook the underlying structural changes and trends. It is anticipated that this trend could continue through the end of the year.
After this, the trade surplus of $9.56 billion is the largest in 7 years. The cumulative trade surplus for the first 9 months of the year stands at $50.47 billion. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, Seoul and Washington have launched a joint working group to pave visa tracks for the entry of skilled South Korean workers into the U.S. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Seong covers this effort and more.
Seoul and Washington have agreed to clarify the rules for U.S. business visas in a move to ensure the smooth entry of Korean professionals driving multi-billion-dollar investment projects in the United States. The two governments launched their first bilateral visa working group in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday local time, responding to the visa bottlenecks that led to the week-long detention of more than 300 Koreans connected to a Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia last month. Of those arrested, 170 were on short-term ESTA travel visas and 146 were on B1 or B2 visas. While they were released after a week, their detainment was highly questionable as U.S. State Department rules allow B1 holders to train local staff and install equipment. At the working group's first meeting, the two sides confirmed that B1 visa holders are permitted to install, service and repair imported equipment. The U.S. also reaffirmed that ESTA travellers are allowed to perform the same activities as B1 holders. To remove ambiguity, both governments will soon release a joint fact sheet outlining the scope of permissible tasks. The two sides further agreed to install a Korean investor desk inside the U.S. Embassy in Seoul to serve as an access point for Korean companies investing in the U.S. and help resolve visa issues quickly. Direct contact points will also be established between Korean consulates and U.S. immigration agencies for close coordination. Beyond these measures, South Korea raised the need for institutional improvements. Australia and Singapore, for instance, have dedicated visa tracks for the entry of skilled workers to America. Washington cited immediate legislative hurdles, but pledged to continue reviewing possible long-term improvements. U.S. President Donald Trump, along with local officials and experts, have stressed the need to keep Korean workers on site, given their role in setting up massive high-tech factories in America. However, with U.S. regulations murky and many skilled workers hesitant to return to the U.S. after the mass detention in Georgia, Korean firms have raised the need for clear and reliable measures to keep America a trusted investment destination.
Despite turbulence brought by the Trump administration, the broader U.S. political establishment continues to see strong ties with Korea as vital. Militarily and diplomatically, Korea remains central to America's East Asia strategy, so this should be emphasized and leveraged in consultations. Economically, Korea is a leader in key industries, like chips and batteries, is expanding major manufacturing investments in the U.S. Korea's strengths in defense, shipbuilding, and advanced technology should be maximized to secure favorable terms in U.S. visa programs and broader economic cooperation.
Seoul officials say fundamental solutions are needed if Korean firms are to deliver their multi-billion-dollar commitments to the U.S. economy. The new working group agreed to meet again at the earliest possible date to continue their consultations. Oh Seong, Arirang News.
Also in the U.S., the first federal government shutdown is taking place after lawmakers there failed to narrow their differences over funding bills to keep the government open. Our Park Gonu has the latest.
Donald Trump once again faces a government shutdown starting October 1st local time. Unlike the record-long partial shutdown in late 2018 during his first term, this time it's a full shutdown as Congress has failed to pass any of the 12 appropriations bills to fund the government. The competing short-term funding measure failed to pass in the Senate by Tuesday, the last day of the 2025 fiscal year, after the 55-45 vote fell short by 5. Republicans wish to keep current spending levels until November 21st, while Democrats demanded an extension of healthcare tax credits.
Republicans are plunging America into a shutdown, rejecting bipartisan talks, pushing a partisan bill, and risking America's health care, worst of all.
Trump blamed Democrats.
They wanted to be able to take care of people that have come into our country illegally, and no system can handle that. And so we're totally opposed on that. Our country can't handle people that come into our country illegally, and they want to give them full health care benefits.
He also warned of consequences, including vast numbers of layoffs for federal workers. The Congressional Budget Office estimates around 750,000 workers could be furloughed each day of the shutdown. Essential workers protecting life and property are expected to remain on duty without pay. With no clear timeline, eyes are on whether further negotiations can take place to turn the American government's lights back on. Park Onu, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump reportedly remains open to talks with North Korea's Kim Jong-un on the margins of the multilateral APEC meeting here on the Korean Peninsula starting at the end of this month. Our Lee Seung-jae covers these prospects and more.
U.S. President Donald Trump is signaling that he remains open to dialogue with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and this time without preconditions. A White House official told reporters Tuesday that Trump could be willing to meet Kim during his upcoming trip to South Korea for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. The official's remarks came in response to questions about whether the U.S. leader is prepared to resume talks with Pyongyang, even without directly addressing the nuclear issue. This marks the first time the Trump administration has publicly confirmed that there are no preconditions for renewed dialogue. The official also noted that President Trump held 3 unprecedented summits with Kim during his first term that helped stabilize tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Jong-un himself said earlier this month he would consider resuming talks if Washington dropped its denuclearization demands. But while extending an olive branch abroad, Trump also sharpened his rhetoric at home. On Tuesday, he summoned hundreds of top military leaders and advisors to the Marine Corps base in Virginia. Speaking alongside Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Trump laid out what he described as a tougher, more uncompromising vision for America's armed forces. He proposed using U.S. cities as training grounds for troops and called for a greater military readiness to counter what he described as an invasion from within.
We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out.
At the same event, Hegseth declared an end to what he called woke culture in the military and unveiled new directives, including fitness standards set at male-level benchmarks for all service members, regardless of gender. The meeting underscored Trump's intent to remake military culture and assert a stronger domestic role for the armed forces. He warned that commanders unwilling to follow his approach should do the honorable thing and resign. The dual messaging highlights Trump's current political strategy, extending a hand to North Korea while projecting a more forceful image at home. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Constitution of the
Former Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa has been appointed ambassador to the U.S. This is according to the Foreign Ministry here on this Wednesday. During her tenure as foreign minister, she oversaw South Korea's diplomacy during the first Trump administration. After stepping down from the ministry in 2021, Kang has been heading the Asia Society in the U.S. She was the first woman to serve as foreign minister in South Korea's modern history and now also the first woman to be appointed ambassador to Washington. A presidential committee on popular culture exchange was launched on this Wednesday to take a listen to the president's remarks at the ceremony.
대한민국과 세계를 잇는 가교로서 교류 협력의 확대와 관련 산업의 성장까지 함께 이룰 수 있도록 큰 역할 해주시기를 부탁드립니다. 8길이 원칙이라고 지원은 하되 간섭하지 않는다라는 원칙을 철저히 지켜서 현장에서 자율성과 창의성이 제대로 발휘될 수 있도록 지원하겠습니다.
The advisory committee will be co-chaired by Culture Minister Choi Hee-young and K-pop producer Park Jin-young. It will bring together government officials and heavyweights in the music, gaming, webtoon and film industries. Also here in Seoul on this Wednesday, Culture Minister Choi Hyung sat down with World Intellectual Property Organization Director General Darren Tang. On their agenda were ways to better protect that is, K-content copyright and to bolster global partnership. Chair urged the organization to play an active role in tackling overseas violations to ensure the rights of Korean creators. Since 2006, the Culture Ministry here has funded programs of the World Intellectual Property Organization that train copyright experts, promote awareness and support international enforcement and dispute resolution. On the cultural front, one of Korea's most celebrated contemporary artists is taking center stage here in Seoul to share her bold take on modern art well beyond its boundaries. Our Pyongyang files this report.
Step inside, and it feels like entering another universe. A giant silver airship floats above, while a vast mirrored installation pulls visitors into a space of infinite reflections. It's disorienting, playful, and mesmerizing all at once. This is the world of Lee Bul, one of the most influential figures in Korean contemporary art. Visitors were taken in by the complexity of her work.
It's pretty amazing how complex some of the structures are, and when you walk through, there's a place where there's all mirrors and you get very disorientated. So it's kind of dystopian, the way that some of the pieces melt down, and it's kind of like this weird city that's almost like set in the future kind of vibes.
Glistening surfaces, fractured structures, bunkers and towers all converge into an experience that feels suspended between worlds. Through these works, Lee Bul examines shifting ties between humanity and technology, and nature and civilization, reflecting on the past and present while imagining possible futures. Lee Bul first burst onto the scene in the 1980s with radical performances, suspending her own body from ropes or parading through city streets in elaborate costumes. This brought her international recognition in the following decade, along with the nickname Yeonsa, or warrior woman, of Korean contemporary art. But today, she has gone far beyond that nickname.
What makes her remarkable is that she transcended labels like Korean, Asian, or female artist, and has presented a wide-ranging body of work that reflects deeply on human history and culture.
Now in her 60s, Lee Bul is recognized as one of the biggest names in Korean modern art, with exhibitions at MoMA, the Venice Biennale, and New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art.
From warrior to world-renowned visionary, Lee Bul has redefined the boundaries of modern art here in Korea. Her retrospective from 1998 to now runs here in Seoul until January before traveling overseas. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
This is the world now. Turning to the Middle East, President Trump has issued an ultimatum to Hamas to accept a U.S.-backed plan to end the Gaza war, describing it as the group's best chance to avoid further bloodshed. The 20-point framework already endorsed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu includes a ceasefire, the disarmament of Hamas, and the opening of humanitarian corridors. The U.S. says it has backing from regional partners as well. Trump told reporters that Hamas has 3 or 4 days to respond or face consequences. Hamas officials on Tuesday said the proposal is being discussed by the militant group. Analysts say it's a high-stakes gamble. If Hamas accepts, it could pave the way for peace talks and international reconstruction aid. If it rejects, Israel could escalate operations and violence may spread further into the region. The ultimatum comes as Gaza faces worsening humanitarian conditions, with aid agencies warning of shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. In the Philippines, a powerful earthquake rocked the Central Islands on Tuesday morning, leaving at least 5 people dead. The tremor struck near Cebu, one of the country's largest urban centers. The U.S. Geological Survey measured the quake at a magnitude 6.9. Thousands fled into the streets in Cebu City and neighboring provinces fearing aftershocks. Authorities confirmed at least 5 deaths and dozens of injuries. Damage was reported to homes, businesses, and infrastructure, though no tsunami warning was issued. Emergency crews are now inspecting bridges, hospitals, and other critical facilities. Officials say residents should remain alert as strong aftershocks remain possible. Researchers in Hungary have found that dogs can classify objects based on their purpose. In a study by Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, dogs were asked to fetch toys labeled as fetch or pull. When new toys were introduced that looked different but had the same function, the dogs still correctly selected the toy based on its function. The findings published in Current Biology suggest dogs can extend learned labels to functionally similar objects, an ability usually linked to young children. Scientists say the results highlight how much more there is to discover about canine intelligence. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
The morning air was cool, but it turned somewhat hot in the middle of the day. Most regions this morning started at around 15 degrees Celsius, but it rose to 26 degrees in Seoul and 29 degrees in Gohung, so the daily temperature range in inland areas widened to around 15 degrees. Let's find out the weather for the Chuseok holiday. Tomorrow night, it will start to rain over Jeollanam-do province and Jeju Island. And on Friday, National Foundation Day, the rain will spread to Gangwon-do province, the Chungcheong-do provinces, and other southern regions. On Sunday and Monday, the day of Chuseok, there's rain forecast for the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 19 degrees, Gyeongju at 15 degrees. Highs will rise up to 25 to 27 degrees all over the country. A lot of rain is predicted around the southern coast and Jeju Island this time. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching. That all the meals here serve as a foundation of its practices. The process of making a meal requires deep interconnectedness. And being thankful for the effort is the first step forward. Tastes rendered by time, scented by nature, temple food is made with the wisdom of its practitioners, and it's a peaceful meal to fill your heart. Gratitude is the core of the practice. The refrain from the 5 pungent ingredients supports mental clarity and mindfulness. Refraining from taking the life of any living being, practicing to cherish all life.
satisfying your hunger and emptying your mind. Food can nourish the body and cultivate awareness. Keeping gratitude and relationships in mind, finding peace within yourself. Temple food, seeking to calm and clear the mind.
APEC leaders are preparing to make their way to South Korea at the end of this month to partake in the multilateral meeting in the city of Gyeongju. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello, welcome to Wednesday's edition of Press Perspective. It's October 1st here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. We are now counting down exactly 30 days to the two-day APEC leaders meeting in the Korean city of Gyeongju starting October 31st. For more on the upcoming multilateral meeting, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German news agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, welcome back.
I'm very excited to be here.
I also have freelance journalist Yang Chen-hao from Taiwan. Chen-hao, it's been weeks since we last spoke. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, long time no see, and it's also good to come back to here.
Right, Fabian, we shall start with you. Let's begin then with some background information, perhaps, about the APEC forum. What is it? How does it work? Why is it relevant, Fabian?
Yeah, let's start with the name APEC. That stands for Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. That already gives you some clues what it's about. Namely, it's a regional forum, Asia-Pacific region. It was basically expanding in the last year, so now it covers member countries from Taiwan to New Zealand to Peru, Canada. So mainly in the Asia-Pacific region, but very broadly, that expanded quite a lot. And it is about economic cooperation, so about trade, facilitating trade, reducing tariffs, facilitating business, etc., those kind of things. I would say the importance or the relevance of APEC is its economic might. It represents countries that generate more than 60% of the global GDP, and I think 40% of the world's population. So it's really huge. How does it work? The highlight of APEC is always the Leader Summit, an annual summit that this time will be in South Korea. And of course, it's very spectacular because head of states will come and gather. But it also has like ministerial meetings, working groups, etc. And maybe one difference compared to other organizations like the European Union or the World Trade Organization, it's not binding. It's mainly on a voluntary basis, so to speak. So that is a strength and also a weakness of the APEC, because basically what people decide, what the countries decide is on a voluntary basis. And why is it relevant? I think not only the economic aspect, I think also the geopolitical aspect, because you have many countries who, let's say China, US, Russia, who basically during this summit will get a stage to engage diplomatically on an informal level. And I think that's quite relevant today.
Right, and speaking about relevant, Shen-Ha, what aspects of this year's APEC here in South Korea appears to be making headlines?
Indeed, things are looking very different now since President Trump has been elected again. A lot of things what the United States, the government is doing feels pretty uncertain and unpredictable. Right now, the two biggest main issues are, first, it's like the United States and China relations, and the second will be President Trump's tariff policy, which has already had an impact on many countries around the Asian Pacific area. And on top of that, South Korea has gone through another change in government with the new Lee Jae-myung administration, signalizing that it wants to push for dialogues between North and South Korea and with the United States too. These are likely the key topics that reporters will be focusing on APEC this year. And at the briefing to foreign journalists 2 weeks ago, South Korean's foreign minister Cho Hyun has already told us that Chinese President Xi Jinping is almost certain to attend the APEC summit. That probably means that if President Trump and President Xi meet face-to-face in Gyeongju together, and people are wondering that what kind of interaction the two leaders will have. And key issues on the table between the United States and China, including whether Trump will let TikTok keeping operating in the United States, and the tariffs. Both sides have been slapping on each other, which has really hit their economies on both sides. And we'll be watching closely to see if the two leaders can make any progress or find any solutions when they sit down together. And something else interesting with APEC coming up, President Trump has also said that he's open to have dialogues with Chairman Kim Jong-un without any preconditions. So there's fully speculations that the APEC summit in Gyeongju this time could even become a turning point for renewed United States and North Korea contact. And maybe, just maybe, we could see Chairman Kim make a personal visit to South Korea.
Right, and before we delve further into that, Fabian, with regard to the potential summit between the leaders of the US and China, what role do you suppose can the South Korean president play?
Yeah, so the South Korean president sees himself as a bridge builder, as a mediator between those two world powers. And I think the message that Lee Jae-myung wants to deliver is that we can manage both relationships in a constructive way. We can have trade with China, and we can have trade with the US, and also can be security partners with the US. That is the message, but the question is, will that work? So I would say the geopolitical tensions are quite high, and it's actually a risky strategy. Most countries want to stay under the radar. They want to keep a low profile, not to get within the crossfire of this conflict. So I would say if the potential summit between Trump and Xi Jinping works well, then this could also have a positive effect on South Korea. But if it becomes a disaster, that could also be a possibility that, you know, Xi and Trump will not get along, then maybe this could also have a negative effect on South Korea. So I'm very excited journalistically to see what will happen, because the US-China relation is the most consequential relationship of our time.
Right, indeed. Chen-Hao, as you mentioned, there is also quite a bit of speculation about a possible summit between President Donald Trump, US President Donald Trump, and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. What factors, Chen-Hao, do you suppose might facilitate a summit between Mr. Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un?
I just mentioned that President Trump, he said he's willing to talk with Kim Jong-un without any conditions. In fact, back in late September, North Korea's state media has quoted Kim himself during the speech at the Supreme People's Assembly, saying that he has very good memories having talks with President Trump. And Kim also added that if Washington drops what he called its vain obsession with denuclearization and faces reality, then there will be no reason not to meet with the United States leaders. But I also want to stress today's situation is so different from President Trump's first term. Back in 2018 and 2019, President Trump, then South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un, they have met several times indeed. North Korea was at least saying that it want to work or taking some efforts toward denuclearization of Korea Peninsula. Even though many people are doubting their sincerity, still at that time, provocations against South Korea and to the United States has really decreased. Fast forward to the after pandemic and through President Yoon Suk-yeol's term, things have shifted again. We can see that North Korea has taken a much tougher stance, even building close ties with Russia. Look at that, they have already sent troops, tens of thousands of the soldiers to Ukraine to support Russia's war in Ukraine and making the situation even more complicated. So we all saw it earlier in September. Putin and Kim Jong-un, they both went to China, meeting President Xi to mark the Victory Day, the parade. We all saw that, standing alongside with President Xi, and it is very clearly looked like the three country leaders were presenting a united front against the United States leading world order. So looking ahead, whether it's at this APEC summit in Gyeongju or in the coming years, if the leaders of the United States and South Korea and even North Korea actually sit down together, if that really happened, will Pyongyang still willing to push for denuclearization for the whole Korea Peninsula? Honestly, that seems very difficult now than it was for like 6 or 7 years ago. Still, President Trump might try to turn the North Korea into the showcase movement, because once think about it, if President Lee Jae-myung and Trump and Kim Jong-un meet together, they will totally dominate the headlines across the global media. But the reality is North Korea has kept expanding and upgrading its weapons, its power, the military capabilities, and continues to slam United States and South Korea on joint drills, the military exercises. In the past, even if Pyongyang wasn't serious, it was still saying that, oh, I'm willing to have at least trying to take some efforts on denuclearization. But now Kim Jong-un doesn't seem interested in mentioning it at all, which raises the real concern. Will the Washington authority end up making concessions first just to make that big shows happen?
Right. Well, the optics of having all those three leaders come together would be quite symbolic here in the country. Fabian, moving forward, President Lee Jae-myung has pledged to push for an AI initiative at this year's APEC leaders meeting in the city of Gyeongju to ensure responsible AI use. What advances in the arena do you foresee at this upcoming gathering?
Yeah, I think what we will see is more the starting point of a debate that deals with so many complex questions that I think there will not be a breakthrough soon. But the responsible AI use is a key topic of our times. Lee Jae-myung has recognized that and is pushing this topic. For example, recently he gave a speech at the UN, and he also made a responsible AI use a central topic of his speech. South Korea, in my opinion, is in a good position to be a leading force on that field because, first of all, it has a tech-savvy population. It is a high-tech economy, leading in many technologies, also relating AI. It knows what it's talking about, so to speak. And it is a third country. It is not China. It is not the United States, which are the other two world powers for AI. And I'm sure there are many, many countries in the world who have an interest that neither of those two world powers will dominate those rules. South Korea is a more, how can I say, maybe neutral or maybe also non-threatening country just by its history and also by its size. So I think it could come up with suggestions because there are many sensitive topics included. Responsible AI use, I mean, what I think about is actually how will militaries in the world use AI? Or the big tech companies, what algorithms, what AI can they incorporate in apps? Should there be a global framework? I mean, that would be an ideal solution when companies from all over the world would agree to a legal framework. But I mean, that is very complex, so I think we will only see a starting point to this discussion.
Fabian, I agree with you. So many questions, so few answers with regard to AI. Jen Hao, as Fabian mentioned at the start of our talk, APEC's objective is to foster economic cooperation and integration within the Asia-Pacific region by promoting free trade and investment. Now, some claim this stands in sharp contrast to the Trump administration's America First policy. Keeping that in mind, what are your prospects with regard to a potential joint Gyeongju declaration at this year's summit?
Compared to World Trade Organization, WTO, actually APEC's dialogue mechanism is a lot way more looser, or should I say flexible. It is unenforceable indeed. It's more like officials and representatives from different countries getting together in one place, talking things through, coordinating with each other, with their own national policies with other members, looking at the region as whole to promote a greater trade integration you have just mentioned, and liberalization across the Asia-Pacific region. But as you just mentioned, President Trump, his America First approach has indeed carried a strong protectionist tone. He's been putting pressure on lots of countries, in some cases almost using threats to push them into talks that end up with requiring more concessions to the United States. And that's why many people are worried that, will the core values of APEC, like multilateral trade and economic liberalization, actually be carried forward, or will it be not that important anymore at this APEC summit? What we know for now is that South Korea, as the hosting countries this year, is pushing all of the APEC members to sign a joint document, tentatively called a Gyeongju Declaration, Gyeongju Songon. We don't know the exact contents and wording yet, but clearly the goal is to get all of the members to reaffirm their commitment to trade integration and liberalization. The tricky part is that the United States, as one of the APEC's core members, has already raised trade barriers in the past several months. President Trump has shown very little interest in the WTO. And within the United States, China, and Russia, these three countries are all competing with each other. Reaching a consensus is indeed going to be extremely difficult. So the big question is whether the South Korean government can really step up as a mediator, convincing major powers and even the rest of the members to come together and embrace multilateral trade and economic openness. That will be the real test of the new Lee Jae-myung government at this APEC summit in Gyeongju.
Right. Fabian, beyond the APEC leaders meeting, another event that is garnering quite a bit of attention is the APEC CEO summit. Who are the heavyweights expected to attend that particular summit, and what issues of interest are on the business front there?
Yeah, when you look at the potential CEO list that is expected to visit Gyeongju, then you realize how important this region is, especially in terms of technology. I would assume that the big bosses from South Korea will be there. For example, Samsung CEO Lee Jae-yong and SK Chae-tae-won, SK Hynix, Samsung Electronics. I mean, those are the big players when it comes to semiconductors. Then Jensen Huang from NVIDIA could also come. Basically, all the Silicon Valley CEOs who maybe from Apple, OpenAI. I mean, nothing is confirmed yet, and I think there will be last-minute confirmations. But I think that we should look out for. And then, of course, Chinese companies. I mean, I would be very curious to see, for example, the Alibaba CEO or Pinduoduo, that's the company behind Temu. I mean, basically the Chinese tech companies, they are right now expanding into Western markets, also including South Korea. Will they come or not? I think, at least for Korean and US CEOs, I think one of their interests would be to get China and the US along very well, because they suffer from trade tensions, they suffer from tariffs, they want to do business with both big world powers, with both markets. And I think this will be one of the tensions between head of states who have to, pay attention to their national interests, which not always align with company interests. And I think it will be interesting to see what will be the statements of the CEOs compared to their respective head of states.
Right, for sure. Chen-Hao, what are some of the events that you would like to cover beyond the official multilateral meeting and, of course, the sideline summits?
There's something I really want to point out that here. As many of you know, I am from Taiwan, and because of pressure from China, my country doesn't have many chances or opportunities to take part in international organizations. APEC is actually one of the very few multilateral platforms where Taiwan is able to participate under the name of Chinese Taipei, and it is also one of the rare occasions where Taiwanese government officials, representatives can meet and have interactions with the leaders from China, from South Korea, from Japan, and from the United States and many other countries, all in the same place in one time. So naturally, Taiwan's media always pays close attention to the question, who will our government send this time to participate APEC, and how will China respond that to choice? And in the past, under President Tsai Ing-wen's period, the most high-profile, the most famous guy, representative our government sent is Maurice Zhang Zhongmo, the founder of TSMC, has been attended for 2 times, as I remember. And last year, during President Lai Ching-te's first year in office, it was former economic minister and the former vice premier Lin Xin-yi. But for this year's APEC meeting, the summit, the representative hasn't been decided yet. And since APEC is a relatively loose economic forum and a consultative mechanism, so it doesn't carry heavy political weight. That's why even Taiwanese officials, envoys, and Chinese officials do meet together. They usually don't there are no fireworks or direct confrontations. But given the ongoing trade war between the United States and China, and with Taiwan now also in negotiations with Washington authority over tariffs, the bigger question is, how can Taiwan position itself as the world's core hub of semiconductor manufacturing, the foundry? Taiwan needs to find a way to balance the risk between both the United States and China while maximizing our own benefits and securing a stronger role in the international community. And that's exactly why this issue, Taiwan's APEC participation and how it plays out, has become such a hot topic for our journalists back home.
Right. And Fabien, what about you? What are some stories do you plan to cover during the APEC gathering here in the country?
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to give a boring answer, because working for a newswire means you are stuck with your laptop attending press conferences. Maybe when you're lucky you have a little bit of time for networking, but probably you will not have time for a proper dinner, but just stuff some sandwich or so. So I will be probably busy doing the hard news. But if I would have more time, then I would also pay attention to actually what Xianhao said. I'm personally very interested in the conflict or the geopolitical conflicts on the sideline. I think that is something we should not forget. In my opinion, it's a shame that Taiwan can only, be represented under Chinese Taipei, and that there's so much pressure on this peaceful, democratic governed island that, it cannot be represented. I think that's a shame. I'm looking forward to how Taiwan can manage the threats that it daily faces, really on a daily basis. And I think in this region, I wish that South Korea also pays attention that something what we've seen in Ukraine, that, another country attacks another country, will definitely not happen in this region. And for this, we need awareness. And I think at least APEC, even though it's an economic forum, it will also be a platform for those discussions, and it will also give a platform for Taiwan to present itself.
Right, for sure, for sure. And personally, I do hope you get a chance to enjoy the delicacies in Gyeongju. The food there is quite amazing. All right, Fabian, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Xianhao, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.